Hi guys, Sharper back once again with another minting box for TokuToyStore.com, and today we're going to be looking at another RKF figure. This time it's the Decade Armor, and this is one of Zi-O's big important upgrades because this allows Zi-O to have Decade's ability of using other people's powers and grants him the use of the Hay Saber. Just taking a look around the box, it's fairly standard. Look at the toys, look at the features. Decade Armor's just flat face, it's funny to me. It reminds me of the Gamba Ride Kamen Riders that you see in the Japanese arcade games. But yeah, fairly standard box art, and it's got a nice magenta and black colour scheme, very fitting of Decade himself. So let's just take a look at the figure itself and go from there. The Decade Armor comes as two separate figures really, because you have the underlying figure and then you have the assorted armor parts that go onto the figure. It's kind of like how Zi-O would interact with a lot of the early Rider armors, except now this is a self-contained figure that you don't need to get Zi-O for, because while the outside is the base Decade armor form, underneath is an entirely different figure, kind of. You'll see what I mean. But for the most part, it's a solid figure. The head doesn't move especially well. That's because of all the built-up armour around the neck joint. But it has a decent range of motion. Can look side to side, though it has to tilt its head up. Usual ab crunch. Nice rotation of the arms. And the armour pieces in the legs do not hinder any movement whatsoever, and these armor pieces actually stay in the slots. These are not going anywhere no matter how hard I shake them, which is fantastic because they finally got them right. Included with the figure is the Hay Saber, which has a variety of different forms and is basically another watch motif. Mainly that the blade has the watch links as well as the handle. There's a big turning thing on the side and the dial on the face of it, which accesses a bunch of powers dependent on which rider it selects. And you can select multiple. So you can extend the blade and it will turn fiery because it's like Blade and Ryuki. So yeah, it's a solid little accessory. Very, very soft plastic, but it shouldn't be an issue overall. And the Decade Armor can hold it. Though the watch strap is a tad too wide for the hands. So instead of just gripping it like that, it has to do it like that. So there may be some issues, but for the most part, it holds it pretty well, and you can get some decent poses out of it. The main gimmick of the Decade Armor is the fact that it's basically two figures in one, and this is achieved primarily through parts forming. Now, if you don't know what that is, parts forming in Transformers parlance means instead of just all of the parts being self-contained on the figure, you do have to take stuff off and put them back on. So we're going to do that with the Decade Armor, and it's mostly taking off the big bulky grey bits and swapping some elements around. Even the shoulder pads, which do have instructions on how to take them off more effectively. The insides are kind of a nice soft rubber, so it doesn't feel like too much of a stress point. Okay, we are literally almost done. So now is time for his face off, and the chest piece. We'll put on the gauntlets. Well, that's kind of haunting, isn't it? Just a hollow face. And put on the accoutrement. And there we have it. We've got Decade Armor, Rabbit Tank Sparkling Form. Because what this form does for Zi-O is access like a lot of the middle upgrades. So like Rabbit Tank Sparkling, Dual Action Gamers, Grateful Damashi. You know, the ones before the final form. And for this contained figure, they chose Build because he was the last one. So that makes a lot of sense. It's just a shame that we're probably not going to see like another version of this figure that has more elements of different ones. But I suppose you could kind of fudge a kit bash version where you plug in like... Oh, no, that wouldn't work. No other lines are going to be compatible with this. I don't know what I'm thinking. Anyway, back to the figure. So you do get a new faceplate, a new chest plate. The shoulder pauldrons are changed around. I wish I could read what it says, but I just can't. And the undersuit was Rabbit Tank Sparkling all along, including stuff like tank tread feet and the little springy shins. So this is a very clever way of doing this figure, but it is limited to being Decade and Rabbit Tank Sparkling. But it gets the effect across, and it's a very fun toy to mess around with. I've had a lot of fun messing with it, at the very least. Just bring in this hay saber again. And yeah, this frees up his arms and legs, though they were never really hindered, so I don't see any problem with you getting some good poses out of this as well. Overall, the Decade Armor is a ton of fun and well worth the $24.99 that you'll be paying for this. Usually you'd be paying $19.99 for a Rider Armor, but considering this is two self-contained figures in one, you can see why it was bumped up to the $24.99 price point. And I think that is well worth your time and money, because not only is it an important upgrade for Zi-O, it's also a real blast to have fun with. It's a very toyetic figure. It's got a really good gimmick about it, and it's just fun to play with, as well as pose and just have on your shelf. As always, I've been Sharpo. This has been the RKF Decade Armor from Kamen Rider Zi-O, and I'll catch you guys next time on Mint in Box.